Vodkast.
Hello, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. Welcome. Today, we are continuing our series of the Vodkast. And for this episode, I'm going to be answering questions that y'all submitted. If you want to submit a question, all you got to do is go and write to Vodkastpodcaster at gmail.com, or I'll do these community posts now when I'm gathering questions on YouTube, and you can just write one there. I'm also on Twitter, and it's at Jeff Manch, and you can ask me questions about composing, music production, mixing, mastering, life, the music industry, whatever, and I will do my best to answer them here. We are again without alcohol this time, just because it's a little early in the day, the best time to record, and maybe not the best time to start imbibing and drinking. So I've got my water, I've got my phone, which have my questions on it from you guys, and let's just get into it. Okay, the first question comes to us from Wayne Colson. How often, he asks, do you turn down work? Are there any specific warning signs and red flags you look out for when first speaking with a new client? Love your channel. Keep it up, man. Thank you very much, Wayne. And thanks for the question. So I guess, how often do you turn work down? Well, I turn work down not that much now and not that much before. My answer is kind of funny. When I first started, I was never turning down any work. And I think that's because when you're trying to break into the industry, you should really be careful never to turn down any work. I was watching this video and someone asked Phil Seymour Hoffman, the late Phil Seymour Hoffman, what advice he had for young actors. And what he said was, act wherever you can. Even if it's, a commercial or something you think you're never going to get, someone is paying for that room and for you to act and to do your thing. So you never know. You never know who's going to watch it, who's going to see it. So act wherever you can. And that was my mindset back when I first started, because I really wanted to make sure that I was saying yes to everything, being on everything, composing for every genre that I could. And I just wanted my name out there, and I wanted hopefully to have one of those things cut through the noise. But as I've gotten older and my life has changed a little bit and I'm doing different things, I find myself in a fortunate situation where I really only compose for a couple of people, a couple times a year. And they are in Alberta, and they're always working on something really cool, something really smart, something really funny, something that looks really good. And I feel comfortable putting my name to it. And the reason I kind of have this one-to-one relationship with these guys is because I have another job, and it's a demanding one. I work at an audio company, and I'm the head of video marketing there. And so it's tough. That was back then. Now I'm kind of talking about my situation. I sometimes turn down work. It's not always work in the form of composing. It's sometimes work in the form of the mix down for a short film, documentary, or feature film. I used to do a lot of that work too. And I guess this fits into your story about like red flags and things like that. You really don't know if something's going to be bad until you start doing it. I don't think there's any way to know, even if there's like typos in someone's message to you, that still doesn't, what does that mean? That they're maybe English isn't their first language, or they're a really busy person and they don't, there's no real way to know until you start to actually go through the motions with someone. And sometimes, that's kind of what you have to do. You have to fall on your face and go and do something to know, okay, I'm never going to do that again. And something that kind of happened to me was I was working with this guy who I'm still kind of in touch with, but he is, I'll just say he's an amateur, but he's an amateur who pays. And so when you need money, doesn't matter if you're working with an amateur because they pay. So that's great. But I was working with this person who was really bad at pre-production and even worse at production. And I was going to come in at the very end and mix the thing. So, he's the kind of person who I think was a little bit more in love with the concept of being seen and thought of by other people as a filmmaker more than he was interested in actually doing the work. So there was a lot of social media posting and hey everyone, the film starts in a couple days, and hey, I think he had someone bankrolling him, and he was just more interested in the persona of being this kind of filmmaker. And so I got dragged along for that ride. And I also, foolishly sent a couple people his way when I couldn't do the work. And they were also like, yeah, this guy has no idea what he's doing, but he has a lot of money. And so that was the kind of vibe for me is I just hit a point where, the next time a project came around with this guy, I was like, you know what, give it to someone else. I'm too busy and someone else could use the opportunity. But they really wanted to work with me because I kind of rolled with all the punches on that project. And when I say punches, it was just like, oh, be ready because you're going to need to cut this date. And then it was like, oh, our editor dropped out, so we have to find another editor. So we need another month. And like, when you're waiting for the money to come in, and you've pushed out other projects so that you can do this one, and hopefully get paid by this date to pay rent and like food and all that stuff, having someone who constantly moves the goalposts because of their own kind of ineptitude and amateur nature is really tough. And I'm not saying that like when you hit a pro level and you work with a pro person, everything happens on time, because it doesn't, especially with documentary. A documentary is like, you're building the train tracks as the train is moving. It's even in feature film, it's reshoots and things are never really truly done. So it's tough, but there is such a level of just poorly executed and managed pre-production and production that I just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't. This person, by the way, doesn't know that I feel this way. And so that's important too. If you have worked with someone in the past, find a way to politely bow out. All you have to do is say, hey, my calendar's, hey, dude, it's feast or famine. And right now it's feast and I'm way too busy to take a project on. I'm so excited for you, though. I hope it goes well. And please think of me in the future. Like, never come at them with a bullet pointed list of like, here's why you don't know what you're doing. Don't ever do that, because the industry's really small, and maybe they know someone or they get their act together and someone says, hey, I'm looking for a composer. I'm looking for this. Do you know anyone? They're like, yeah, well, one guy is so busy, dropped off my project, but let me send you his phone number. So I'd say if there are red flags, I'm not good at sussing them out in a call or in an email, but you really just have to jump in there with 2 feet and go through it to know how to turn it down next time. I really think, though, that especially if you're an emerging kind of composer, you should take on all the work that you can up front, because it's so saturated now, our field, and the robots are getting smarter. So there's AI tools as well, and there's also houses that all they do is compose music kind of like on demand for people. So if you're a composer that, like you're putting your fingers on the keyboard and making stuff from scratch, I'd be hesitant to turn down work in the early kind of stages. So, but I know I'm very fortunate to have a job in the music industry, and composing I can kind of put over here and just work like kind of Johnny Greenwood works with Paul Thomas Anderson, and that's like they're the only two that work together. That's kind of what I have with these guys, and it's great. But I know that's not everyone's situation. But Wayne, I hope that you're able to find work, and also to have it balanced in a nice way, that you can kind of have a life and have a job and keep the two separate as much as you can. I know it's tricky when I say take on all the work that you can, but I just think that now you have to be entrepreneurial as a composer, as a mixer, whatever. You got to be always selling yourself, YouTube channel, whatever. You just have to be doing that. So I wish you luck with that, and hopefully my answer was helpful. And if it wasn't, let me know in the comments, and I'll do what I can to pepper in some more context for you. Okay, let's go to the next question. All right, so Andrew Levecki, I don't know, asks, what app or payment would you recommend for collecting payments from clients? So far, he says, I've used PayPal and it's okay, but it has its issues. I work with a lot of international clients and my bank charges a hefty fee for checks or direct deposits from another country. I'm from Canada, by the way, Cambridge, Ontario. Cool. Thanks for the question, Andrew. So if you stuck around for my first answer to the gentleman, to Wayne's question, you'll know that I only work with a couple of people, and they're all here in Canada. So what I do is I do an e-transfer, which I'm sure you know what that is. So that's what I do. I used PayPal too. PayPal is a little sketchy. I don't fully understand PayPal. every time I do it, I think like, oh, okay, they're not going to ding me. It's like, oh no, but I'm the person getting the money or sending them, so I get the ding. Like, it always trips me up to be like, oh, that's how it works, you know. And also, I had someone really close to me who had someone just drip taking $5-10 a month out of their PayPal account. And I think it was like, you know, over the course of a couple of years, it was like a couple grand. So it's, and they were never able to recover that money because PayPal was like, well, it's not our problem. We're not a bank. We don't have like, you know, anyway, so it was really, really sketchy. So, I would say that, for now, it seems like PayPal is the only way to send money in and out. I know there's a competitor. I can't remember the name of them, but on a podcast I listen to, they're always advertised as like, sending money overseas sucks. We have a solution. So, I'm sure there's some competitor to PayPal. They're not the only game in town anymore that you can go to. But what I always do is an e-transfer, and that seems to work out really well. Everyone kind of likes it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if banks around the world could figure some kind of e-transfer situation out between banks. I guess you can do, I was going to say a money order, but I don't know if that's a thing that you can do. I guess you can mail cash money, and then I have no idea. It's just something I don't have to think about, but I'm sure with a little bit of research, you could figure out kind of how to make it work for you, because there has to be some kind of solution, right? It can't just be PayPal and e-transfer and then you're done. But what do I know? Sorry, I don't have more information on that, but thanks for asking the question. Jacob Stevens asks, from what I understand, it's common to sidechain the kick drum to the bass in EDM music. Are there other sidechain combinations you find especially useful? For example, lead guitar to rhythm guitar, or is it better to just ride the gain with automation? Jacob, thank you for this question. Wow, a mixing question. I'm really happy to talk about mixing for a change. So, yeah, and for those of you that don't know, sidechaining, you know when you're driving and you've got like the app that tells you where you're going, and a call comes through or something like that, and the app will kind of like duck for a moment to let the ding or the whatever. That's essentially a very basic sidechain. It's one signal that gets out of the way of another for a moment, depending on where you put the threshold for, to trigger that kind of that movement in ballistic with sidechaining. So some people will sidechain the bass to the kick so that when the kick goes, the bass gets out of the way for that brief moment, and the kick is able to have its full power and poke through. So yeah, there's tons of ways to do this. There's tons of different combinations of instruments that really benefit from sidechaining. Drums is an obvious one. The kick and bass, that's one. But I would also say that, another one that I see a lot is sidechaining the overheads to the snare, so that when the snare kind of cracks, the overheads get out of the way for a moment. But you can also do selective sidechaining, so not the entire signal of whatever the thing that's ducking gets out of the way. It could just be, you could be selective about it and have only, the top end or wherever that instrument's power is, so that, not the entire signal is going down. There's also, another kind of phenomenon that you should look at, which is masking. And this is a concept where two instruments are sharing space in a specific frequency range, and you could just decide to have a static dip where, right hand piano and guitar, for example, one of them just kind of goes down permanently. Of course, if it's going down dynamically, that is a kind of sidechaining behavior, but a lot of people think of kick and bass, that's true, but masking and sidechaining happens throughout a session in a bunch of different ways, like I kind of outlined. The most popular is the one that you mentioned. The snare and overheads is another one. You could sidechain background vocals to lead vocals. That is a little kind of wonky. I would say, that might be a little too, annoying, especially if it's very pronounced. If your threshold is very pronounced and the background vocals really get out of the way. That's like a Kanye West record, which I think they all sound very bad, personally. I've never been a fan of his mixing or the way that his music is mixed. But yeah, I'd say more static masking techniques, especially if you're not in EDM, is kind of what you want. Another form of this is what some people I think call Brouwerizing the mix, which is where you've got all of your bass elements, all of your, let's say, percussion elements, your vocals, your keys on their own kind of substems. And then you're just kind of gently blending between those. You're kind of doing like a stem master at that point, but you're dynamically having them interact with each other. There's a plugin that works really well for this called Track Spacer, I think from Waves Factory. It's all the rage. And it's not quite sidechaining, it's not quite demasking. It's almost like a dynamic kind of smoothing out of different sound sources. And a lot of people are using this to kind of help with that Browerization, that this thing that he developed. So that instead of like kind of one-to-one kick to bass side chaining, they just have everything clustered to those different kind of buckets, and they're all kind of gently getting out of the way of each other and adding a kind of cohesion, which is said to kind of, I don't know, just do something really nice to your mix. That's Browerizing as I understand it. It's not something I actually do in mixing if you've watched some of the mix videos that I've done. So I could be describing it incorrectly, but I think I'm right. Anyway, some plugins that you should look at. Obviously, I'd say Neutron by Isotope. They do this pretty well, and they have dynamic sidechaining as well and dynamic demasking between Nectar and Neutron, for example. Track Spacer by Waves Factory is another one. I feel like there's like a Nicky Romero kick thing that came out not too long ago. And there's probably a bunch of other masking things. I just can't think of them. I know FabFilter does do masking now, but they won't actually have one get out of the way, as far as I know, and dynamically sidechain because it's talking to the other plugin. As far as I know, I could be wrong about that. I'm sure someone will tell me that I am. I think that's more kind of old school. You have to key in and everything and go in and this is the source or whatever. Whereas with some of these other tools now, they kind of know what else is happening elsewhere in the plugin and can just move and make space in a more kind of intuitive, automatic way. So that would be something you should probably check out. But hopefully that was helpful. I'm kind of doing this off the top of my head, and hopefully everything that I said was correct and helpful. So let's go on to the next question. Cesar Gonzalez Bueno says, what is your favorite plugin manufacturer? And they wrote here, do not say Isotope. I just think it's funny. Cesar's like, it's not like, don't say Isotope, or like, don't say Isotope, LOL. They're like, do not say Isotope. Okay. So my favorite plugin manufacturers. I mean, it's hard to kind of drill it down, isn't it? There's so many of them. I would say that obviously I know Isotope's tools very well, but let's put him over here for a second. I'm not sure if it's Cesar or Caesar, by the way. Sorry. Put him over here for a second. Let's not talk about Isotope. I think FabFilter they're not my favorite, but they're certainly very powerful and impressive. Perhaps more powerful than anyone really needs, if I'm being honest. I think that FabFilter is kind of veered off into almost like sound designer territory. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention them. They're really great, but like for like Timeless and I think they put out Volcano recently, an update. Like it's so much complexity, and it's almost more control than I think anyone mixing a record needs. So I feel like if I were a sound designer, I'd be like, oh, that's my fit, but I'm not. And I guess where I'm going with this is I would say like Sound Toys is probably one of my favorites as well, because they kind of intersect really nicely between like versatile, but also just fun to use. The names, like Echo Boy and Decapitator, like they have this kind of attitude about them that is more in line with how I think about mixing, which is like having fun and creative and stuff like that. So I'd say if you're not familiar with Sound Toys, well, go watch the video that I did on like, where's your next plugin? But you should check them out because they have a lot of amazing tools, and they're one of my favorites. They've been in the game for a while, and they do this thing where they're not going to covet old gear, but they will be inspired by it and add a bit more functionality to it. It's a nice kind of, it's still skeuomorphic and whatever, and they're still kind of in that space. But so Sound Toys is one of my favorites. I feel like I'm just going through plugin companies and reviewing them now, but UA is one of those companies where I never quite know how I feel about them, because the tools they make are very much like, you get a piece of what made this record that came out 30 years ago great. And it's like, I didn't grow up with analog gear, so I didn't really grow up coveting it, but I'm also not immune to their marketing, which is super powerful. And the idea of like getting the thing that they used on this record is kind of cool. But when you kind of stop and think about it, you're like, well, that record came out years ago, and I'm sure you can get great sounds now, but the sound of records has changed. And so the notion of getting an LA2A, like the compressors now are just as good digitally, cheaper, and they're free in your DAW, and they sound incredible. And you know, when you look at an LA2A from UA, it's just like an LA2A with, I think they might have like a blend or something. They might have added something to make it more like, hey, it's 2021. But I have a strange relationship with UA where I love the marketing. The tools make me feel like I have cool stuff. But when I really evaluate the cost and the functionality versus what I have in my DAW, there's some dissonance there. And also the fact that you need the hardware to run them. So it's like you're kind of in at like $3-4 grand before you can start using the plugin. I mean, the Apollo is, you know, they're a little cheaper, but they're much less capable CPU wise. So you start to put a couple of plugins on from UA, and then pretty soon, you know, you get that little bar being like, you've gone too far. Buy more hardware. So anyway, there's that. I think other plugin companies that I've really kind of grown to appreciate and admire recently is Denise Audio. I reviewed their Dragonfire plugin, and they sent me another couple plugins to check out, which I may. They're just cool. I think we're all kind of attracted to indie companies now because we know who the big guys are, and it's like, oh, here's an indie company. So check out Denise Audio. They're doing some really fun stuff. Waves Factory is one that I've been getting into a little bit. I think they're Spanish or from Spain or something like that. I'm going to talk about one of their plugins soon called Spectre, which is a really interesting EQ plugin that, well, it's a saturation plugin that behaves like an EQ plugin. So they're really interesting to me. Another one is Overloud, I think they're called, and I reviewed their Gem series dopamine plugin, which is really cool. It adds brightness without harshness. So they're doing some interesting things. You know, when I think about other companies in the space that I use a lot, obviously OX Sound is one that I think everyone should kind of keep an eye on, because Soothe 2 is you know, it is what everyone says it is. It's great. It works really well. I haven't quite used Spiff, which is like a transient shaper thing, just because transient shaping doesn't factor in too much to my mixing and mastering and composing, frankly. But I probably should, you know, check it out. I'm trying to think of other plugin companies, and those I think are the big heavy hitters that come to mind the most out of everyone. So do I have a favorite? Probably not. There's just so much good stuff coming out from so many people. As I was thinking about wrapping this up, Output comes to mind for sample libraries and stuff. Maybe not so much, but they've got some cool tools like Thermal, which is a saturation tool, and some other things that kind of like Portal that are a little bit like grain synthesis with some looping and buffer shuffling technology. So those guys are really cool. But I think I've kind of gone through, you know, the list of my favorites. And one company I've never really dabbled in, mostly just because, well, I'm not going to get into it, but Slate, I should probably get in and check them out. But I feel like if I'm interested in an emulation of something, I'm probably going to go to UA, because UA is the company that gets like the blessing from the manufacturer to say, yeah, this is the Pultec, this is the, you know, Teletronics, this is the Fairchild. Whereas Slate is doing this kind of like, we have those things too, but they're not kind of blessed and sanctioned by those companies. So it's like, if I want to get like an emulation of something, why not just go to the source with UA? So I should probably check out Slate just to be, you know, fair, but I haven't really checked them out yet. I'm wondering if anyone on here likes Slate and you want to kind of send me some recommendations. That's the other thing, guys. If you're watching this and you're like, hey, Jeff, you are not thinking about this company or that company, please let me know. And I'll go check them out. So, let's go to the next and final question, which is, Jeff, who are your favorite, artists? Adrian Banks writes that. So when it comes to my favorite art, I think I did a video a long time ago that was all about influences, and you should check that out if you haven't. And these are people that have had a profound impact on my work. I'm assuming this person means like composers or something like that. I think one person now, more than anyone, that's affecting and influencing my work is Cliff Martinez. He used to be in the Chili Peppers, and then he kind of left a little bit like Reznor left and started doing, he didn't leave Nine Inch Nails, but he's one of these like, hey, I used to be on the radio and now I compose using like an instrument that runs on water. It's a crystal bachet or something like that. His work, I think, speaks to me because when I think about my composing style, I'm happy to play, sound like Zimmer or sound like Williams, which I never can and never will, but I'll try. But, I'm not a very traditional music person. I mean, I like guitar and stuff like that, but when it comes to instruments and orchestras, I always go for the stuff that sounds weird and wonderful and like just bizarre and soundscapey. And when I think of Cliff Martinez, I think that's kind of what I would love to aspire to sound like and be. And that's my sound. It's just like slow, plodding, emotional, rich, not like sinewy and tight and like blah and like hybrid. That's not me at all. It's emotional resonance, slow cooked, plodding, kind of maybe atmospheric, if you will. And Johan Johansson was another one. But if you look at I think he did like that, I can't remember it now. The Stephen Hawking, I think he scored that. That's all like, ornate and classical-ish. But I'm more interested in these strange worlds like Arrival or Sicario. Just like that's what I really love and aspire to be. And so he's not my favorite artist. Like I could talk to you all about my favorite bands. We'd be here for another hour. But in the composer realm, especially for what I'm working on now, this documentary series, that maybe I'll share a cue with, that's what really gets me going, is listening to his music. I'm so inspired by it. And the inspiring thing to me is like, I feel like I can replicate what he's doing and add my twist on it. I never feel like his music is out of reach and like, I can never do that. I can never command an orchestra and get into Air Studio or Abbey Road or whatever. Like, that's kind of how I feel listening to some of the stuff that kind of used to pass 10, 15 years ago. And then when everything kind of changed, it was more about like, let's slow it down. Let's introduce new instruments. Let's have a synthesizer hang out with a cello. Like, that's where I get interested and excited. So I'd say no one more than Cliff Martinez right now is kind of one of my favorites out there composing. He's also someone I can just throw my headphones on, go for a walk and listen to his stuff and just get lost. So if you haven't checked him out, you definitely should. So anyway, thank you, as ever, for all the questions. Like, subscribe, doing videos every Monday. Hit the bell. You get notified when a new one goes up. I really appreciate all the people that ask questions. Vodkastpodcaster at gmail.com or at Jeff Manch on Twitter. That's how you ask questions. This is how I answer them. And thanks for being with me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.